Right, that should give you what you want. Okay, then queen cells are recognition and uses. Well, queen cells are something that every beekeeper gets, not always to order, but they get them sometimes at quite difficult times as well. I've got to keep mentioning this book because somebody's found out that it's on eBay at 200 and some odd pound. Well, that's obviously one that's been signed by the author, but you all know about that by now anyway, should do. Dave Cushman's website, which I will mention a couple of times through the presentation. In fact, I mention it through most of them because there's so much information on there and it's all good sound stuff. So you should know about that anyway. But as I keep saying, I do still come across a lot of beekeepers who don't. I've been asked twice today about Nell and Rosie. Well, there they are, because they're the two best known dogs in beekeeping. They haven't been anywhere for 12 months or so, but there's Nell, there's Rosie. So one of them's down there munching a bone, and they're all fine. So thanks very much to the folk that have asked. Queen cells. I'm afraid there are an awful lot of myths and misinformation about them. There are quite a lot of facts as well, but the myths and misinformation, unfortunately, just keeps getting cut and pasted from one place to another. There are natural ones, which of course the bees build themselves, which we're going to concentrate on tonight, and artificial ones, which really we encourage bees to build based on the various impulses of the natural queen cells. And the reason we do that, of course, is for queen rearing, because it makes it a lot easier for us to manage. By now, you should have heard of the queen problems that I've been trying to highlight for about 20 years now. Sadly, it's not well documented, but an awful lot of beekeepers have problems. Some say they don't, but I do question their ability to understand what's going on. But we won't go any further into that. There's information on Dave Cushman's website. I've got a whole page there of some of the things that I've seen, which a lot of other beekeepers have seen, but perhaps if they've come into beekeeping in the last 20 years, they may not recognise. I've also got a video on the National Honey Show website where I'll give them my presentation on that. Now, the reason I mention it is because these problems with queens do throw up queen cells that may be misleading when they're seen in a colony, because if the beekeeper isn't aware of some of the problems, they may think something else is going on. Much of what I'm going to tell you tonight is from my own observations, and I'll indicate those as we go through. And with experienced beekeepers, sometimes observations don't tally up with what you may see in books or what's taught on what one might term the sort of standard teaching. So queen cells then, personally, I don't think they're understood anywhere near enough, not only by beekeepers, but by teachers, BKA officials, writers, and those sort of people as well. So what do most beekeepers do when they've seen queen cells? Well, when I give a face-to-face presentation, the lip reading tends to suggest they all do roughly the same, or many of them do roughly the same, which of course is press the panic button. Why on earth do that? Because queen cells is telling you something about the colony all the time. And so many people just see a queen cell and roar it out without, or, cut it out. Sorry about my Sussex, not quite dialect, but Sussex way of saying things. Before they've actually worked out what's happening in the colony. It may well be the only one there and the queen gone. So don't just start I nearly said it again then, or I will. And don't start roaring queen cells out until you actually know what's happening. As I keep telling people, if you see a queen cell in a colony, just go straight through the colony, have a look, see what's happening, and as I say, assess on the way out, action on the way back. So if you've only got one queen cell, it'll tell you something. If you've got 35, it'll tell you something different. But they can be opportunities as well. In fact, great opportunities, because it does give you the chance perhaps of replacing poor queens, or probably as importantly, raising queens from good queen cells, or queen cells from a good colony. So let's look at the natural queen cells then. They're built under 3 impulses for 3 very, very different reasons. We've got swarm cells that are simply colony reproduction, not individual reproduction. We've got emergency cells where the queen goes absent. And as I keep saying, I've removed several hundred colonies from wild positions. When I say wild positions, it's where they built their own nest that they've chosen. So it could be in a tree or a building or something like that. I cannot remember ever seeing evidence of emergency cells in any of those. Yet when I go to other people's colonies, very often there's the remains of the emergency cell, which incidentally they never seem to put right, and I see them regularly. So I think emergency cells are more to do with what one would term managed beekeeping than unmanaged beekeeping. And then, of course, supersedure cells, which are simply queen replacement for whatever reason. Could be age of the queen, or the fact that the bees detect that she's going to or in the process of failing. Now, all of these, the use of them are frowned upon by a small number of beekeepers, and I don't think it's based on anything other than perhaps they've got to have something to dislike. So natural queen cells are something to dislike. But the bees have been using them for millions and millions of years. So that's, if it's good enough for them, it's good enough for me. And why is it all of a sudden, in the last 150 years or so, a few people have decided that they're bad? Don't know, but that's people for you, isn't it? But I wouldn't mind betting that 75% of queens in colonies actually come from natural queen cells anyway. And why is it that the same person would tell you not to use queen cells that will also tell you to do an artificial swarm? Not to use natural queen cells. Yeah, that's what I mean. Yeah. So let's find a bit about them. Find out a little bit about them. I put this simple chart up actually for something else. It was to do with queen rearing. But I've had so many people say that it is so simple that they fully understand what's happening, that I've actually brought it into some of my other presentations as well. So it's the 15 days of the life of a queen cell. The egg is laid on day 0. It hatches into a larva, although, as we've discussed on earlier occasions, it's not technically hatching, but we say hatching. After 8 days, the queen cell is sealed, and after 15 days, it emerges. Now, on both of those, I've got maybe tomorrow, because some books will tell you a queen cell gets sealed on the 9th and emerges on the 16th. Well, you believe that if you like, but I've learned to work with biology, and biology can be a little bit variable and a tiny bit unpredictable as well. So I'm going on the more cautious side, and I'm not always cautious, but I am with something like this. If you are raising your own queens, it's the last day or two of the life of a queen cell that you should be distributing your queen cells. So they're the last 2 days that you need to put queen cells in your queen mating nukes. And at that point, that's what they are termed as being ripe. So let's just look at swarm cells then. From now on, you can forget a lot of what you're taught and forget a lot of what's in books. I'm not saying take any notice from me, but you've probably got more chance of being closer to the truth. That's not being big-headed, honest. Swarm cells are built from cups, numbers-wise, 4 to perhaps 30 plus, quite regularly, perhaps half a dozen up to 15 or 20. I have had them very much higher than that. I've had them over 100. But normally they're within that sort of bracket. Now, they can be anywhere on the comb. So if you're told either down the bottom or down the bottom and up the sides, yes, they can be, but they can also be on the face of the comb as well. So don't take any notice of people that tell you that swarm cells are always on the bottom or the sides of the combs or whatever, because they can be anywhere. They're usually staggered in age over up to about 6 or 7 days in my experience. Now, they can vary because I have come across some that are no more than 2 days apart, but 5, 6, 7 days is fairly common. Certainly you get some on that are sealed and others with still eggs in. So it's got to be 5 days or so. Now, the great thing is, from a beekeeper's point of view, the bees build them for us. And when do they do it? When the colony is in absolutely tip-top condition to do so. They're usually plentiful. So, excuse me, if you want a queen cell or two, if you've got a good colony that's preparing to swarm, then you'll always find enough queen cells. They're easily cut out, or usually they are. So what I mean by that is if you've got, let's say, 10 queen cells, you're always going to be able to find 3, 4, 5 that you can cut out quite reasonably. And the others, you can do all sorts of things. You can move combs with queen cells on. If they're on the wood, just cut a little bit of slither of wood away. All sorts of things like that you can do. Now, I reckon they're really good for the ordinary beekeeper. And there's absolutely no difference between those queen cells than the ones that people who are anti natural cells will tell you to take from or use from an artificial swarm. Supersedure cells, these are also from cups, so they're queen cells right from the very start. This is my wording, usually 1, often 2, and occasionally 3. And what I mean by that is that you're more likely to only get 1 than you are 3. 3, in my experience, is a maximum you could normally get with supersedure cells. It's usually 1 or 2. Again, these can be anywhere on the comb. So the people that tell you that always on the face of the comb, forget it. They can be, but they can also be elsewhere. I've had them on the woodwork, all sorts of things like that. Can be anywhere. Now, before I forget, I'll tell you that on more than one occasion, I have done a demonstration at a teaching apiary, and I've asked people what sort of queen cells they are, and I've had people say to me, well, that's a swarm cell and that's a supersedure cell. Well, why is that? Well, that one's around the edge and that one's on the face, and that's in the same colony. Now, it's almost impossible to get, but they're working on what they're told rather than what their brain's telling them. Supersedure cells are usually close together. Now, when I say close together, might be on the same comb or perhaps the same seam. and a similar age to you. Do not get supersedure cells 2, 3, 4, 5 days apart. They're usually the same. Supersedure cells normally, certainly in my part of the world, which is West Sussex, you would normally get naturally anywhere between about the middle of July right through to the middle of September. Perhaps a little bit late, end of July, end of July, right through. But now with the problems of the queens that I'm telling you about, you can get them anytime during the summer, and even from very young queens. And I've had them on many occasions, supersedure cells put up when the brood of the young queen hasn't even been sealed yet. Emergency cells, these are ones that are built on worker larvae, because don't forget the queen eggs and worker eggs, we think, are the same. Sooner or later, somebody's going to come up with a scientific proof that they're not actually the same. As far as we're concerned at the moment, they are both fertile eggs, and up until 2 days older as a larva, they are considered to be the same. These are built, of course, when the queen is gone and the bees have got to do something to provide themselves with a queen. Otherwise, of course, you've got a terminal situation in the colony. They're very rare in the wild that I've already mentioned. Emergency cells in my book are badly misunderstood because people just keep following what they've been told rather than having a look in a colony to see what actually happens. And I'll be highlighting that a little bit later on. But some artificial methods of queen rearing are emergency cells anyway. These are mainly what are called the Alley method and the Miller method. Both of them have been used for well over 100 years successfully, and they are artificial queen cells. They are emergency queen cells, but in an artificial situation. So why is it that people aren't opposed to them? It just does not make sense to me. Now, they may be a little bit difficult to cut out because don't forget the queen cell is built from the midrib. Okay, some are built on the edge as well. But if, let's say, you want half a dozen queen cells and there's only 10 or 12 put up by the colony, you may struggle to get them. Although, of course, as I mentioned before, you can move the comb with the queen cells on. Now, they prefer to build on new comb and or an edge. Now, the reason for that, I suspect, is because the older comb is much more difficult for the bees to chew down than new comb because of the thinner cell walls and the less number of cocoons. So just recap on that. Swarm cells are queen cells from the start. They come from cups. More than 4, could be 30 plus, and built anywhere. Okay, they might often be around the bottom or on the bottom and around the sides, but they can be elsewhere as well. Supersedure cells individually will look the same as swarm cells because they come from cups. So both of those are queen cells right from the very start. Between 1 and 3, any more than that, and they're going to be swarm cells, and of the same age too. Naturally in the autumn, often in the winter. Emergency cells, these are ones that are built when the queen goes missing. They're converted from worker larva, built from as a existing larva, obviously built from a midrib, and the bees prefer a new comb and an edge. Now, the identification of these, you can add a bit to it because have a look, see what's happening, see what's going on in the colony, and you can very often find out what is going on. such as if there's no eggs, yet there are emergency cells, yet there are queen cells. You know there are emergency cells because the queen's gone. So look at the signs, not at the books. So if you've got two queen cells close together, same age, they've got to be supersedure. They can't be swarm, and they can't be emergency. So look at the signs. You'll probably get a very different answer than by looking in the book. And here are some examples of what I've got in mind. This is a queen cell, which is clearly a natural queen cell built from a cup. Now, individually, it could be a swarm or a supersedure, but we don't know. It would depend on the number. So if there's 15 of them, they're going to be swarm. If there are only 2, they're going to be supersedure. If there's 6 of them and they're 4 or 5 days apart, they're going to be swarm. If there's 3 of them and they're all same age, they're going to be supersedure. And you can't take any notice of size. And I have seen on quite a lot of occasions, people state that supersedure cells are bigger than swarm cells. Well, they're all different in size anyway, and you're not likely to get supersedure cells and swarm cells in the same colony. So what on earth is the point of saying it, and how helpful is it to the ordinary beekeeper? It isn't. It is just talking for the sake of talking. Here's a comb, pretty poor comb, I'm afraid. It's one of Richard Senior's Hey, who's that? Anyway, all right. We have 2 queen cells there and 2 there. So we've got 4 on the face of a comb. They have got to be swarm cells, not supersedure. But it will depend quite a bit on what else there is in the colony. So if there's another 10, then very definitely a swarm. Incidentally, up here somewhere, let me get my pointer. We got some cell cups here, and I think some more down here. So I have one there that the queen didn't lay in for whatever reason. Don't know why. There's 5 there on the face of the comb, none on the edge. 5 of them, they're bound to be swarm, not supersedure. But these, look at them. They're the same age. Look, the end is thinned down, so they're going to be within a day or so of emergence. They're close together. If they are the only 2 in the colony, absolutely dead certain they are supersedure. But to give you a little bit more value for money, I'll give you a little bit of a hint about something else. There's a wire there, frame wire. Now, I've never ever come across frame wire going through the contents of a queen cell. So if you do actually want it, and obviously you want the queen cell, there's several ways you could do it. You could just run a scalpel or something like that down the other side along the wire line to tease it out. Or you could nip the wire top and bottom, or you could cut this one out. And then if you want to put this in another colony, just take the frame with it. This is an emergency cell, that one there, probably a day and a half from starting. So you can see what they've done. They've extended the cell, and they always clear out underneath here. Always, well, usually clear out underneath there. You can see they're built from the midrib. You can see the midrib behind. You can see it's fairly young comb, and you can see they're actually all different ages. And I'll tell you a bit about that a little bit later on. Well, these are on the edge of a comb, and they are very definitely emergency. You can see that we got some fairly young comb there as well. So nice and easy for the bees to build out. Although I will say that to an inexperienced eye, they could probably look a little bit like natural swarm cells. You need to know as beekeepers, and this is something which isn't very often taught, if at all, the more queen cells there are built at swarming time, the more swarmy the colony is usually. And what I mean by that is at the point of swarming, not before then. So when the first one is sealed, count the number of cells, and if you've got, let's say, 8 or 10, they're going to be fairly low swarmy bees. If they've got 40, they're going to be quite swarmy. So that is a clue. It's not absolutely 100%, but it's close enough to for me to tell you. Now, peak queen cell number is something you very, very rarely hear about. To the best of my knowledge, it's only mentioned in 2 books. That is The Honeybees of the British Isles by B. Wolfe Cooper and the Cell Punch book by Richard Smales. They're the only 2 books that I've seen it in. And peak queen cell number, what is it? It's the number of queen cells that a colony would normally build at the point of swarming. And it does go on a little bit because it seems to correlate with the number of emergency cells that are put up. So what I mean by that is if a colony would normally put up, let's say 10 queen cells at swarming situation, if you took the queen away, they put up within shouting distance of 10 in an emergency situation. If they will put 40 up in a swarming situation, it will be round about 40. And when I say round about, it could be within 10, 15, or even 20%. But it, you know what I mean. It's either high number or low number. So put those 2 together, and it should tell you quite a bit about queen cells, the swarminess of the colony, and that sort of thing. So really, if you've got 2 colonies that in other respects are equal, if one puts up 8 queen cells at the point of swarming, don't forget, and the other puts up 40, go for the one. If you don't want swarming, go for the one that's on the lower number. Now, if you have got a colony putting up queen cells and you remove some of those, they will probably build some more if the queen is still there, roughly up to the same sort of number. Now, if a queen is removed and you've got swarm cells, emergency cells will be built if you remove some of those swarm cells. What I mean by that is, if let's say you've got 15 queen cells being built, first one's right on the point of swarming, of being sealed rather. If you take the queen away, they probably won't build any more. If you remove half the queen cells, they will probably build roughly the same number of emergency cells that you have removed. So you need to be aware of that. Now, strangely enough, if you take a queen away when they've almost on the point of swarming and leave all the swarm cells there, they usually won't put up any emergency cells. But if you remove some of them, they will. It's a strange phenomenon, but that is what happens. Here's some myths and misinformation regarding queen cells. Bees will only swarm on swarm cells. Well, that's not my experience. I know there's currently a booklet out that states that, but I can tell you that if the colony is in the right condition and the weather is fine, irrespective of how the queen cells were built, whether they're swarm, supersedure, or emergency, there's a pretty high chance that they will go out with a swarm. So don't take any notice of that one. Where queen cells are on a comb, I think I've covered that one, probably to death, but don't rely on swarm cells being around the edge and supersedure cells being on the face of it. They can be, but they can be anywhere as well, anywhere else as well. And also supersedure cells bigger than swarm, which I've covered. This is another one that's crept into beekeeping in the last few years. If you leave queen cells, leave 2 queen cells. Why do you leave 2 queen cells? In case one is dud and you've got the insurance of the other one. Problem is, well, there's 2 problems really. One is that if the weather is fine and the colony is in the right condition, it's likely to swarm with the first one to emerge. And if you don't believe me, just try it. Please try it. The other thing is, bees cannot detect for 5, 6, perhaps 7 days that a queen cell is dud. So if you've got leave 2 queen cells, one of them is dud. The first one to emerge will clear off with a swarm, leaving the colony with 1 dud queen cell. So, if anyone tells you that, then make sure they're on the swarm list and they collect swarms out of somebody else's chimney. Swarm cells perpetuate swarming, do they? Well, for millions of years, bees have relied on swarm cells for raising queens. Why is it then they're not all swarmy bees? It just doesn't make sense. It's just something that's copied and copied and copied and copied. Queen cells near drone brood are supposed to, or some of them are supposed to have drones inside. The only time I've ever seen drones in what appears to be queen cells is where you get a drone laying queen and the bees put up what appear to be queen cells, but the drone's inside. I have never, ever, ever seen a queen cell, proper queen cell in a good colony that's adjacent to drone brood that's got a drone inside. I think another myth. But of course, there are going to be people who tell you, oh, well, I've seen it. Well, they may have done. And no, that's it. Emergency cells produce scrub queens. They can, but so can all the others. The reason they produce scrub queens is because the beekeeper usually does something daft. And I will leave that one there at the moment anyway. If we leave unsealed queen cells, we're ensuring that there's a larva inside because a sealed one may be dud. It makes sense, doesn't it? It's logical, but of course it's false logic because the unsealed one can be sealed in 2, 3, 4 days time or whatever. Now, where this came from has been misinterpreted because very often if a queen cell emerges, the lid comes down, out comes a queen, in goes a worker bee to clean out the residual royal jelly. And bees have got a sense of humor a bit similar to mine. So what do? They close the lid and sort of semi-seal it up. So it looks very much like a sealed queen cell. So when the beekeeper thinks, oh, that's the one I'll leave, and they go in a week later and it hasn't emerged, you find a dead worker in upside down. So that's one of the reasons why you would leave an unsealed queen cell. So it's an old reason, but given a new meaning. Now, of course, the other thing is with a sealed queen cell, you don't always know the age, but if it's unsealed, you can estimate it, and you certainly know it isn't going to emerge for at least 7 days. So it gives you extra time. Oh dear. Oh dear. There's two queen cells on a queen excluder. Well, they can't be supersedure cells because they're not on the face of a comb. And they can't be swarm cells because they're not around the edge. Oh dear, what are they? Well, they can be anywhere. Some of them can actually be horizontal too. So be careful. Let's get back to this, this little chart. So a queen cell is, a queen cell is sealed for around 7 days. Might be 8, but let's go on the cautious side at 7 days. Now, if you leave an unsealed queen cell, that's fine, because let's say you leave it on a Saturday, by next Saturday it won't have emerged. Therefore, it suits weekend beekeeper. So if you are a weekend beekeeper, you can perhaps work your management around that fact. Okay, some people will say that the queen cell is sealed for 8 days. Let's work on 7 so that we can be on the side of the weekend beekeeper. Now, what happens when a queen is removed from a hive? Now, these are my observations. I know they're not shared by books and they're not shared by a lot of teachers, because what the main view is that if you take a queen away from a hive, the bees immediately start raising emergency cells all at the same time. Well, that's not my observations, and I'll give you some proof in a slide or two. But what normally happens is, depending on the size of the colony, the bees usually realize within an hour or two that the colony is queenless. The smaller the colony, the more the quicker they realize it. And I think it was on Tuesday, John Getty gave us a talk, and he said that he can take a queen out of a mini nuke and immediately put a queen cell back in, and the bees most times accept it. If he did that on a full colony, they probably wouldn't. And the reason is because, of course, there's so much a pheromone going around, called queen pheromones, going around the big colony, that may not be going around a small colony. So that's why they usually realise a full colony within an hour or two. Now comes the differences. Some of them you'd hardly know were queenless at all. Hardly know. I've come across many colonies that don't even give off the queenless raw yet. I've taken the queen away, and I know 4 or 5 days later there's no eggs or whatever, and I know they're queenless, but they're not roaring. Yet others can be absolutely frantic within a couple of hours, and I've seen single brood chamber colonies with no supers on. I've seen bees climbing all over the roof 2 hours after I've taken the queen away, because they're looking for their queen. Now, when do they start emergency cells? This was actually a question in a BBKA module paper a few years ago. It might even have been resurrected, because they do tend to give the same questions every so often. And I wonder what the answer was, but my observations are anywhere between 8 and 48 hours plus later is when they start. And I'll give you an example in a slide or two. They don't do it, in my experience, immediately as we're told they should. Oh, let's go back to the last one. It does vary with colonies. It's 8 and 48 hours. Some are very sharp. Others are very much more leisurely about it. And I really don't know the reason why. It's over up to 3 to 4 days. And I've checked this on several occasions, and I'll give you the results of a little bit of amateur experiment soon. You have a look as soon as they start building emergency cells. What you'll find is they usually use young larvae if they're available. Usually, you look inside and there's tiny larvae. So this business about they use larvae that are too old, unless that's all they've got, I would forget that one. Now, if you cut out any emergency cells, as we're told to, and of course, because they're started at different times, they're at different stages. So the thinking is that those that are sealed first must have been built on older larvae, when in fact, in my experience, they were just started first. And I just wish these people that tell this stuff would actually go and find out from their own bees. But as we know, some of them aren't those sort of people. But let's not worry about that. Let's just worry about us. So if you cut out any, so going back to the situation, if perhaps the colonies put up 12 emergency cells, if you cut out one or two, they probably won't build any more. But if you cut out 6 or 8, they do. Right, now these are the ones they start all together, not as what I call the first wave. So these are the ones, because the larvae are getting old, these are the ones that are built on older larvae, and these are the ones that usually end up as poorer queen cells and subsequently poorer queens. This, I think, is why emergency cells have a bad reputation, simply because beekeepers cut out after 4 days, 5 days, or whatever it's supposed to be. I call these panic cells. Whether that's the right term or not, I don't know. Now the bit you've been waiting for, the result of a little experiment I did. I started by dequeening a colony on 22nd of May 2019. Well, in fact, I did it on 4 colonies. So we've got a colony here, which for ease of the table, I've called A, B, C, and D. I did them on the 22nd. So this is the results 1 day later. What's in brackets is the number of days later. And this is a date above. So 1 day later, 2 days later, 3 days later, and so on. So, yeah, this is a colony. Right, A1, colony A, that happened to be a swarm that came into a bait hive, one of my own bait hives, early, 12th of April. Wasn't one of mine. I think it came from the roof of a big house about a half a mile away, but that doesn't really matter. This may have been the reason why the low number of emergency cells. So this is the number of emergency cells that were built. Only 6, which is actually quite low. My guess is, but I don't know, that if that had been an established colony, that these figures would have been higher. Right, and this, of course, is why when you're doing experiments, even on an amateur scale, you need a big enough sample. Right, B, C, and D were all very, very similar. They were all full colonies with 2 or 3 supers on, all with overwintered previous year's queens. Now, I can't remember, I've got the record somewhere, but I can't remember if they were all sister queens or half sister queens. I do not know. It probably doesn't matter anyway. Right. There was only one out of the, these are what happened. I went in within shouting distance of 24 hours later each day. So if, let's say, I dequeened them all at roughly 4 o'clock, then it was somewhere between 3 and 5 when I went through the rest of them. It wasn't 8:30 in the morning or anything like that. Sorry, I missed that bit out. Right, so 24 hours later, there was only one colony that had started emergency cells. and that was 14. Now, what I did with all these, I was very careful, shook the bees off, not heavily, but I shook them off so I knew what I could see. I don't brush bees because I don't like getting stung. So there was only one, and that put up 14, which is quite a high number. 2 days later, 48 hours after dequeening, one colony still hadn't even started queen cells. And that very one, after, 4 days, let's say, between 4 and 5 days, all of a sudden it decided it wanted another 2 when it had 3 in the first place. So it's gone up, 60%. This one here, chugging on in 11, then all of a sudden after 4 days, 4 days and a bit, it decided it wanted one more. Why was that? And I'm pretty certain I didn't miss that earlier. I'm pretty certain of it. Now, this one here, which is the one that started first, that was the one, the biggest number all the way through. Now, at that point, there were 3 queen cells aborted, even 3 queen cells out of 33. So they got back down to 30, and they decided, even though they had 30, decided they wanted another 3. And when queen cells are aborted, you can tell when they are because they're chewed down from the end rather than in the side, because of course at that point there's no cocoon. And even though after 4 days they've got 33, they decided they wanted another 4. Hope I'm not boring you folk. Are they still here, Richard?
Oh, what? Sorry, I was just asleep. No, they're still here. They're still here and they're listening.
And that same colony, there were 4 aborted just after day 5. And one was aborted. Sorry, I'm misinterpreting that. One was aborted, and they still built another one on that inspection. And this one here, one queen cell aborted, and even though they'd only had 2, they're down to 1. They decided, even at that late stage, they were going to put up another 4. So what's going on in their minds is absolutely beyond me. And this one here, at the same time, they'd lost 2, but didn't decide to build any more. So there's 2 different things going on with those 2 colonies. I hope I've got this, put this across. Now, if you are in the slightest bit interested, I believe the November 2019 BBKA News, I wrote about this. I think it was I think it was that one. So, okay. Please, folks, don't believe me. Try it yourself. But I think even with that small sample, it's thrown a lot of what we taught out of the window. So if you're looking for queen cells, always shake. If you're going to keep them, I wouldn't shake. Personally, I've never really found that much of a problem. But certainly for amateur beekeepers, I would say brush or whatever rather than shake. Or if you want to, grab hold of the lug like that and shake sideways. Just thump your wrist so that the pupa doesn't fall down the queen cell. Now, when you've got queen cells, you need to be very, very careful. I expect some of you have seen this, because that very frame, when you shake the bees off, that was what was underneath it. And that one, shake the bees off, and that was underneath it. So you need to be very careful when you're looking for queen cells, don't be frightened of shaking. Just shake down on top of the comb. By the way, let me go back to that. I know some people shake down inside. I now always shake across the box. If the queen's on there, then she's going to go down on top of the frames. I have seen, to the best of my knowledge, 5 queens killed in my life. That is all. It is very rare. Killed or maimed. 5. 2 of them were on the same day at the Whisper Green Teaching Apiary by 2 different demonstrators, 1 each, and they both killed a queen. And I think what happened was one got caught down on the side of the frame, and they banged it down inside the box and killed the queens. So I shake over the top, and I've never had a problem. So that's up to you. You do exactly what you like. This one here, there's only 2 bees covering the queen cell, but where is it? It's there. And there's one. There's only 1 bee covering a queen cell there. Where is it? There. There it is. Well, that mark, bee covering it. So you need to be very, very careful, folk. And if you've only just started beekeeping, or you've only got a couple of colonies and you haven't really come across much of what I'm talking to you about, be very, very careful. When you do cut queen cells out, cut them out with plenty of comb, like I showed you on the earlier comb that had about four cells of chalk brood in. Cut out with plenty of comb so that you can use that to hold it into the comb where it's going. Of course, if you're just taking them out, it doesn't matter monkeys if you're going to destroy them. So that's a nice place to put a queen cell. Just fold back the. This is obviously an old cell cut there. Just fold that back. Put the queen cell in. Push it in on the bit of comb, and she should emerge from there. And they are all done. Or if you want to, like I've already said, move the comb with the queen cell on, if indeed that's what you want to do. I'm often asked, how big should queen cells be? Well, there's a 50p piece, and there's a queen cell up against it. So there or thereabouts. Don't forget that is a natural queen cell. It's got to be, because this is where the cut was on the top bar. That one isn't. That's an emergency cell. Not the same 50p piece, but they're all roughly the same size. But queen cells aren't. Now that's an emergency cell. Don't forget the top end of it is going back into the comb. That one is absolutely fine. No problem with that. Now, sometimes you have holes in the side of queen cells. Why is that? Well, it's because there's more cocoon down the bottom end. If the bees want to destroy it, they can just chew in the side and chop out the contents. And there are a couple further advanced, and you can see the cocoon down the bottom here and why the bees have gone into the side. Now, I think it's very definitely worker bees that chew into the side. I know some people say it's virgin queens. Personally, I don't think it is. There's a lot of work there for a virgin queen to do, and bees do this whether there's virgin queens in attendance or not. So there we are. Protecting queen cells. Why would we do that? Well, if the queen's recently been removed from a colony, of course you've got the pheromones that are still going round. And as I said earlier, if you put a queen cell in straight away, the chances are it will be chewed down fairly quickly. About 4 hours is what I would normally reckon. I would say for you folk who I assume most of you are fairly new to beekeeping, I'd probably leave it 8 hours to put in a bare or a naked queen cell. If you want to put one in straight away, then what you've got to try and do is to stop the bees chewing into the side of the cell. So what you've got to do is cover it up in some way so that they can't do that until they realise, of course, they need it, and then you're going to be fine. So how would you do it? Well, I know there are those circular wire cell protectors that are called West cell protectors with a little lid that goes on the top. There's also now a plastic equivalent. I've probably had or acquired some of those over the years. I have never, ever used either of them. I've sold ever so many in as auctioneer of the West Sussex auction over the years in boxes of stuff that haven't been used. But I've never used one myself. So this is what I use. Metal foil. So something like cooking foil. Just cut off a bit, about 4 inches, 100mm square, something like that. Fold it twice, nip off the corner so you get a square hole in the middle like that. Make sure that it is metal and not plastic, because some of the wrappers now are plastic and the bees can chew those quite easily. And the way you can tell is if you scrunch it up, plastic recovers, metal doesn't. So that's the way you can tell. And if it's, let's say, something like a chocolate wrapper, it's not always that easy to tell what it is. So that's what you do. You put the queen cell, and that's not a natural queen cell. That's one made on a nickel cup kit. Just push it through, so you've just got the tip of the queen cell sticking through, and what you're doing is wrapping the foil round so that bees can't chew in the side, and that's what you end up with. Okay, these are different ones because different from photographs, right? And then they emerge like that. That's a different one altogether. That's much tougher foil, that is, and they work fine, and you don't have to buy these little plastic or metal cell protectors that you probably lose anyway. So some uses of queen cells. Well, you all know presumably about a test comb that you put in a colony if you're not sure if it's queenless or not. The reason you'll put that in there is probably because you haven't got any queen cells anywhere. So you're expecting the colony to raise queen cells on that comb. If you've got queen cells, put one in there, or put one in there. If it's a small colony, you can probably put two, doesn't really matter. It's unlikely to swarm. If the bees want it, they'll keep it. If they don't, they'll chew it down. So if they chew it down, you know that they've got something that satisfies them as a queen. Now, it might be a queen that's gone off lay. It might be a laying worker. Or it might be a virgin queen. Don't know. You can use most of the natural queen cells I told you about for raising small numbers of queens. So that's really useful for the smaller beekeeper. I'm raising, well, last year I raised 150 queens, and if I come across good natural cells, I'm happy to use them. If they come from good colonies, I haven't got a problem. What it does do is it gives you an opportunity to improve your bees simply by using queen cells from your better colonies if they raise them, and replacing the queen in your poorer colony. One trick the older beekeepers did was if they had especially a bad tempered colony, but you can do it with any colony if you like. To requeen it, what you could do is you can put a queen cell in that's protected, but don't forget, if the queen's already in there, you're going to have the bees chew down the queen cell. You just put that in. So take the supers off, put queen cell down between the frames, protected, must be protected. She will probably in 80% of the cases emerge, and the colony will treat that as a supersedure. Now, I have used that technique. You don't see much about it these days, and certainly probably wouldn't find it in a modern book. But I have requeened bad temper colonies that way. On one occasion, I come across 3 really bad temper colonies, and I certainly managed to get 2 of them superseded or requeened in that way. So that's it, folks. The dogs want to know if they can answer any questions. So over to you, please, Richard.
Excellent. Thank you very much. You just caught me looking through me BBK news to try and find that article. Right, look.
Did you find it?
I can't, and the BBK news website's down for some reason. So I was going to search for it.
I think it was October or November 2019.
Right. 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 In my last inspection 3 days ago, I had 3 queen cells, 2 sealed, 1 unsealed, few eggs, a couple of half frames of worker brood, few dotted drone brood. He's inner city Birmingham, not close to oilseed rape. What could he do? You couldn't see the queen in that hive.
You're going to have to read that to me again.
So he's done an inspection 3 days ago. He's in Birmingham. No,
3 days ago. Yep. Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry, I thought you said last inspection, but yeah. Okay.
He's found 3 queen cells. 2 of them were sealed. Only a few eggs, worker brood, and a few dotted drone brood. He wants to know what he can do about it.
Again, this I'd like to see, but it depends. If the 2 sealed queen cells has only just been sealed, and the unsealed one was fairly close to being sealed, I think you can say they're roughly the same age. But don't forget, we're dealing with biology, so it take they may have all been laid at the same time. We don't know. I would actually like to see that. It's looking like a supersedure. 3 queen cells, certainly. If he said he got no eggs, then I'd say they might be emergency cells. But the fact they've got eggs there, I think we're looking at a supersedure. Drones, depends how big the colony is, and if there's any worker brood there too.
It says that there is a couple of half frames of worker brood.
Oh right, half frames.
Few dotted drone brood.
Yeah, this is a supersedure. What can he do with it? Depends how many other colonies he's got. If he's got several other colonies, I would say from interest point of view, leave it and see what happens. Because if those queens emerge, he'll get them mated. I'm pretty certain. I'll tell you why, because I had a similar situation, not last year, the year before, where I had emergency cells in 2 colonies in March, and they both got mated. So my guess is that they will. It looks like being a fairly small colony, which really isn't gonna help one of the others if he unites them. Right, let me go sideways with it. Yeah, very often and I don't know why this is, but very often if you get a queen that's failing, which this one obviously is, they run away and hide, and they're difficult to find. And I suspect that's what it is. Either that, or it's just disappeared within the last 3 days. Without seeing a colony, it's difficult to say.
Yeah.
But I think probably what I do is leave it and see what happens. I think so. If he can afford to, even if he's only got 2 colonies, quite honestly, I don't think it will be much good messing the other one around to try and save something from this one. Because usually what happens is it's easier to let the other colony or colonies go and then make up the loss if indeed this one's going to be a loss.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. It's not being unhelpful, but it doesn't help being in the not being able to see it. If you could send me some photographs, I might be able to help.
Yeah. If that chap just wants to send me another Q&A, and I'll send that on. Tim asks, he has one AMM colony that he's been confirmed by wing morphology, collected from a cast swarm last year.
Yeah.
And 2 heavily hybridized buckfast colonies. The AMM colony is very active and growing well this spring, but is quite defensive. He'd like to use the AMM to produce queen cells, but can you breed better bees from this starting point, or is it destined to produce only more defensive bees?
I think he'll be okay. Just because he's had it checked by wing morphometry doesn't necessarily mean that it's particularly pure. There could be something else going on in there. To check purity, he would need to look at DNA. I mean, it could have been crossed with almost anything. It's not just the patterns on the wings. There's other things that are going on as well. If it was me, I would raise queens from that one and requeen the others too, and see what happens. Of course, it depends where he is, because if he's in an area of heavy hybridization, heavy mongrelization, call it what you like, technically it's mongrelization, not hybridization. What you may find is that he's still going to have pretty heavily hybridized bees, which will be a pity. Be interesting to see where that one came from. But did he say a wild swarm?
A cast swarm.
Oh, cast swarm, yeah. Right, okay. So yeah, it depends what he's got around him, because if it's a cast, it's going to be a virgin queen. So she would have mated with whatever there is locally, and it depends what else he's got in the locality. Give him my email address. Ways it's online anyway. He can get me through.
I'll send him it,
or through BIBBA. Don't really matter. And we'll try and work out what's going on. I think the key is because he said it was a bit defensive. But on the other hand, what can happen, and no disrespect to the questioner, some of these buckfasts, and I'll say buckfast very loosely because they're just a mixture from what I can see of it. Some of them can be very, very gentle, and of course, what I call real bees, they do need a bit more smoke, and it might just be that somebody's used to these soft buckfast things, and treating them the same as the other colony. It may be there's nothing really wrong with them. Yeah. I can't do any more now, I think, Richard.
Okay, yeah, I've sent him your email anyway. Jenny, why do the bees make so many swarm cells? Are they dividing the colony into 30 separate swarms?
Next question, please. Well, yeah, we always try to humanize things, don't we? Why is it well, when they're swarming, all they're really looking for is just one or no more usually than two queens. When they're replacing a queen, they're just looking for one. Why is it when they're replacing a queen that they put up no more than 3 queen cells, yet when they're swarming, they make them sometimes put up 30 or 40? It doesn't make sense to us, but we are dealing with biology. So, and also in emergency situation, all they're doing is replacing what's got lost. So it's they only really want one. Why is it they'll put up 15 or 20? It just doesn't make sense. Next one, please.
Yeah.
Are you a slow reader?
Yeah.
Good.
Do you mean that superdelegates cells are usually one to a frame, usually one to a hive?
Super delegate.
Well, that's why I was taking so long to read it, because I'm trying to understand it. Do you mean that superdelegates cells,
I think I mean
supersedure, are usually one to a frame, usually one to a hive?
No. In a hive with supersedure cells, it's either 1, 2, or 3, no more than 3. Now they're usually close together, so they're usually on the same frame or the same seam. You don't get, let's say, 2 in a colony. One's on 3 in from one side, and then it's 4 frames away. They're close together.
Finn says, do the bees naturally pick better or most suitable eggs than the ones a beekeeper can choose when they make to make queens with? So do bees naturally pick better, more suitable eggs to make queens with?
I think the answer to that is we probably don't know. But what will be better anyway? We have got the issue of patrilines in a colony, and there was a hint several years ago that the stronger patrilines tended to pick their own for the purposes of raising emergency cells. I think the scientists have debunked that one several years ago. In any case, if you get a heavily mongrelized colony, I won't say hybridized, but heavily mongrelized colony, you get all sorts of queens, all sorts of colors, exactly the same as you do with workers. So I don't think so. I know there is a view that if you select larvae for raising artificial cells, you're doing the selecting, not the bees. I don't know whether there's any mileage in that or not. Personally, I don't think so, but we at the moment, I'm pretty certain, don't know. There's probably some guesswork somewhere, but I to the best of my knowledge, there's no hard scientific evidence. People might be working on it. I don't know. Yeah, sorry.
Tamsin says, "What is a scrub queen?"
Ah, right. That's a small queen that probably hasn't had the length of a time being fed as a queen as a normal one should be. So it was probably started when it was too old. Might be 7 days, let's say, from the laying of the egg rather than the normal 5 maximum. Yeah, it's a typical beekeeping term.
Kate and Charles say, when shaking frames with queen cells, could you turn the frame upside down to avoid the larva from being dislodged from the cell?
Try it. What you end up with, bees all over your hands. Yeah, tried that one several times. Personally, I don't think there's anywhere near as much issue as is made of it. The old chap who taught me my beekeeping, he held the frame by the lug like that. I've got a frame here, and he just thumped his hand. Now that would take it sideways. Now I know there's a view that what you're doing is you're shaking the larva away from the food, but in a sealed cell, it's fed by then. Well, I think it is. So I don't think it makes sense. I think probably what's happened is because queen cells are nowhere near as reliable as they used to be. You get black queen cell virus, all sorts of things. I actually showed one a week or two ago, a queen cell with chalk brood, which is what we're told shouldn't happen or doesn't happen, but it does. It clearly does because I've got a photograph of it. And I suspect, but I don't know, people have been thinking that by shaking the frame, you're damaging the larva. What I'm going to do, and what I've been meaning to for a long time, is when there's a when I'm doing some rearing of artificial queen cells, literally give the frame a fair old shake and monitor it and see what happens. My guess is that there won't be that much of a problem. But having said that, I want to tell certainly the ordinary beekeeper not to do the sort of things that I do, because you want to try and make sure you get maximum efficiency and success. I tend to do things because there's nobody watching, and I've always done it that way. But yeah, if you want to be absolutely certain, then don't shake combs with queen cells on.
Simon says, in your last example of supersedure, does the new queen kill and replace the old bad-tempered queen?
No, in that natural supersedure, you very often get the young one and the old one side by side. In fact, I showed a photograph earlier today in the earlier session. I've even had 3 queens in one hive. Mother or grandmother, mother and daughter. In three generations at the same time. But with natural supersedure, and I don't mean the modern sort of supersedure that we're getting, where young queens are superseded. Natural supersedure takes place towards the end of the season. Very, very often in April and May the following year, you can get mother and daughter side by side. You don't necessarily know which one's laying. It may well be both of them still. We could find out, but I'm not sure. My guess is that they both are. Otherwise, I suspect, but I don't know. I don't think they'd feed the older one. And I don't know, but I think what happens is that she gets starved simply because she perhaps isn't giving off the pheromone. The bees don't recognise her as a queen, and she just goes hungry. But if you get what I call the modern supersedure, so you get young queens being superseded, for some strange reason, the older queens don't live very long. They I don't think in any supersedure the young queen kills the old one. I suspect that it's it's starvation, but I don't know.
Yeah, the questioner says, I meant the last slide where he put in a new queen cell.
Yeah, to requeen.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. The old method of putting a protected cell in a colony with an existing queen, so you ended up with a supersedure.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know, but as I say, my guess is that will be treated as a natural supersedure, and my guess is that the two queens might be laying side by side for a bit, and then the old one would disappear. And why I don't know, but I doubt if it's a fight in a supersedure situation. I doubt it.
Roger, how early do you put out your swarm traps?
Swarm traps or bait hives?
I think it's bait hives.
Oh, well, don't forget I'm in the south of the country, and I already told you that I had one out. Was it 12th or 15th of June?
April.
April, yeah. Is that before June? Yeah, it is, isn't it? Yeah, yeah. 12 or 15th of April. So I'll be getting mine out in a week or two. Yeah, but of course further north, then could be, almost into May before you do it.
I think Rebecca's question was answered. Can I check in if the nasty queen was removed in the requeening mentioned at the end, or the superseder would kick out the existing queen? And you've answered that. You think that they would continue to lay for a time together?
I think they would, yeah.
Helen says, did you find... Oh, no, they're all asking the same question. That's Helen's asking the same one. Maria says, is the cell punch method okay for someone who's never done any queen rearing before? I don't really need to use a cell starter colony for... do I really need to use a cell starter colony for one stage and another to raise the queen cell?
No. Cell punches, unfortunately, they're not available. Well, yeah, okay. They are sort of available, but we're hoping to get some made to the original pattern. So if you've got cell punches now, they're not the real old-fashioned cell punch. No, what you can do is with any of these methods, you can just use a queenless colony. And the trick, of course, is that if you dequeen a colony with a poor queen, then use that. And then if you want, let's say, 4 queen cells, you leave one behind for the colony that's raised them. And you can use, despite what the books might tell you, you can use a full honey producing colony for that if you want to.
Okay, John says, so are you saying that a colony will always know that they have a sealed queen cell present, or that you have added one and their behavior will change accordingly?
I'm not quite understanding the question. Is this for yeah, sorry, I better speak up. I'm not understanding the question. Is it for a protected queen cell?
It doesn't say. It was at 8:37, so it will have been towards the... are you saying that the colony will always know that they have a sealed queen cell present, or that you have added one and their behavior will change accordingly? Sorry, I wasn't paying attention as to what you were saying at that point.
Actually, neither was I.
Well, John, write back and give us more information and we'll answer it.
Well, yeah, let's try and work out what he means.
Well, He'll pop a bit more information.
Yep. Okay. Yeah. Let him do that.
Have you ever used pulled queens? If so, do they prove to be as good and as well mated and as long lived?
It doesn't make any difference. All you're doing really is
what's a pulled queen?
Well,
is it where they pull the cell really long?
No, they're actually termed pulled virgins. It's where you get a queen cell that's about to emerge, and a typical sort of situation could be you've had let's say you've had a colony that's got or had a clipped queen. Clipped queen's got lost. Swarm's gone back, and you go in there in the morning, let's say, and you find there are 2 or 3 queen cells emerged. You don't know whether a swarm or a castle. Yeah, it will probably be a swarm. You don't know if that's gone with one of your virgin queens. You look for the colony, you can't find any virgin queens, which are quite difficult to most people to find anyway. Right, but you've got these others that are about to emerge. If you release at least one and then take down all the other queen cells, you know that they won't swarm because there aren't any still queen cells left. So even if there are 4 virgin queens in there, they will fight it out. Now, the ones that you release, they are called pulled virgins.
See, I've learned something new already.
Yeah.
And you said
it's an old term, and there's and most of me's old.
And you've found no difference in the mating and the longevity?
Absolutely. Well, no, because they're natural in 5 or 10 minutes. So would have, because you can see when they're chewing around the end of the cell.
Yeah.
Now the thing is, if let's say it's 10 o'clock in the morning, just for argument's sake, you don't know whether they've already gone or whether they went the night before, if indeed they have, and you can't always tell by the number of bees in a hive either. Don't be fooled by that one. So if you just release them, release 1, 2, 3 of them, it doesn't really matter. The key is to take out all the other queen cells, absolutely everything, because even if you leave just one queen cell behind, and it's, let's say, not going to emerge for 2 days, the swarm will go with all the virgin queens that are inside there. I helped somebody. We picked 19 virgin queens out of a hive out of a swarm on one occasion, and they still took off. So still had more in there. Yep.
Right. Linda says, what were the results from your 5 hives with the queen cells? Did the one with more cells produce a better queen?
Can't remember. No, can't remember.
Oh,
hang on, wait just a minute. I don't know. I'll tell you why, because all of those were colonies that I was going to requeen anyway, which is why I took the queens away. Even the swarm that came in, they weren't that great, so they were knocked on their head. So what I did with them was I had some queen cells coming on, and I just put a queen cell in with them, which of course it was absolutely ideal, because after 6 or 7 days, roar out all the queen cells. I'm talking about roaring queen cells out again. Roar out all the queen cells, and put a decent queen cell in there. Yeah. So in answer to the lady, no, I didn't. In any case, I think it's much too small a sample, really. I don't think you get anything from it. Yes, that's me.
If checking a frame with queen cells and you don't want to miss any hidden cells, would you recommend brushing the bees off?
I never ever brush bees off. I'll tell you why, because in my experience, bee brushes wind the bees up. They just get caught in the bristles, and if you want to get stung, use a bee brush. The only people who use bee brushes that I know get fully booted and suited, so they don't get stung. They can actually get quite bad tempered. Um, um, yeah, I would shake them off.
But your beginner kit always comes with a bee brush.
I know it does. That's annoying, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
How do you breed non-prolific queens?
By what their mothers are, really. It's just a case of knocking out the more prolific ones all the time. And I think probably because of what I've got going on around me, I do get a few prolific queens. I do get occasional one that just puts wood to wood brood. So in a single brood box, they're absolutely useless. So that they don't last very long.
John's come back to us. Would a queenless colony that has become nasty then become calm once a sealed queen cell is added?
No, it's when the queen emerges. Yeah, when the queen emerges. Oh, cool. Sorry, I got cramp in my fingers. I'm laughing about it. Yeah. No. Let me come at it from a different angle. There's always been this view that if you've got a bad tempered colony, if you requeen it with a good tempered queen, you've got to wait for all those bad tempered bees to die off before the progeny of the new queen takes over. I've debunked that myth many times, and it's not quite yet answering the question, which I'll probably forget when I get there, but you can put me right, kind of. But I've had a quite narky colony right next to a good tempered colony. Swap the queens over, and within 2 or 3 days, what I found was, and I've done it 12 12, 15 times, something like that. What I found was, in the majority of cases, and by majority, I probably mean 80%, what I found was that the characteristic went with the queen. So the good tempered colony, if I put a bad tempered queen in, within a day or two, those bees will turn bad tempered. Right. Let me. Right. Let me. So let me go on from that. On many occasions, I've split up a colony into perhaps 3 or 4 nukes, and I may well have given them a queen cell from perhaps different sources. Right. Until those queen cells emerge, the nukes have usually behaved exactly the same as the original colony and all roughly the same. All this business about queenless bees always being bad tempered, forget it. Just forget it. If they're bad tempered anyway, yes, you expect them to be bad tempered. But if they're normally good tempered colony, it just doesn't work like that. Anyway, what I found was, and this is not really doing an experiment, but observation over, doing it several times. What I found was that when those virgin queens emerge, that's when the characteristic of the colony seems to change. Now, it could be that they one of them gets really gentle, and another one perhaps gets a bit spiky, and another one starts running around all over the place. I think it's because the queens have come from different places. So, am I answering the question? I think I am. Yeah, right. Okay. So, getting back to the one where you've got a bad-tempered queen, if you put a protected queen cell in, my guess is that within a short time, the colony will change if the old queen goes. I think the old queen's got to go first, because I think she's still got the influence. And it's only a guess, I know, but I think it's probably the queen's pheromones that are determining the temper in the colony. I know there's always stuff about it's the drones that determine it, but I'm not quite so sure. But I'm going on practical experience and what I've seen from bees rather than reading books.
I did that after hearing you speak in York, swap 2 queens over, and I found the same, that the characteristic went with the queen.
Yeah. But you can't get the so-called knowledgeable people to understand that. They just won't accept it. I think it's because they're fixed on what's in the books or what the scientists have said. But there's a lot of things that are happening out here in the field that that aren't believed.
Alan says, are you ready for this? Listen carefully. We have a queenless colony with no drones and 2 cups of workers, no eggs. And then we have a queen-right colony, which has brood. Should we transfer brood now and hope to request, oh my word, we previously erroneously understood that virgin queens would not be mated this early in the year? So I think what they're saying is, should they transfer some brood into this queenless colony in the hopes that it will raise a queen from that brood? Will it get mated?
Right. I don't think we'll get to what he's asked. Just look at it seriously. Though, how old are those bees? If the colony is that small, the queen stopped laying, could even have been back end of last year. Those bees are quite old. So if there's only 2 cups of bees, you've hardly got enough to keep any brood warm. Bees would be dying off quickly. I'm sorry, but if it was me, I think I'd shake them into a plastic bag and put them in the freezer. And don't tell anyone, because as far as the general public are concerned, they're on our side, on beekeepers' side at the moment with bees. And if they thought we were killing bees, especially baby bees, they would be jumping up and down. But seriously, I think that they're going to be old bees, and you're just being unkind, I think. And that sort of number, it's not even worth trying to unite with anything else. You've got to try and work these things out. If there was a couple of frames of bees, it might be worth doing something. Perhaps taking a little bit of brood out of the other colony, sealed brood anyway. But then what you could well be doing is wrecking one colony to help a hopeless case. It's sad, but these are the sort of things that are coming to beekeeping in the last 20 odd years. And I suspect it was a queen failure back end of last year that just never got noticed. If he'd like to send me a photograph of what he's got, I will have a look. But I mean, they're all old bees. They're not nurse bees. They've got a lot going against them.
There's a couple of people sent in places where you can buy cell punch systems.
Yeah, I know.
And I've purposely not sharing that, because I know your thoughts on the current ones that are out there. But somebody says, should I stay away from buying them from this place?
It's not for me to tell people where to buy things or not to buy them, because I think that's unfair and unreasonable, especially as this is going to get recorded.
Yeah,
because
I will speak to you after about it, because they did say that it looks exactly like yours.
If it's but if it's recorded, I wouldn't even have to repeat it in court, would
I?
When I keep being told about these.
Yeah. So the people that have sent them in, that's why I've not shared them with everybody. When you do your shaking of the queen cells experiment, will you shake queen cells of different ages? It may be more damaging in the initial stages where the body is soup-like. When the body cells are in their final position, it may be less damaging.
Yep. Absolutely right. And of course, if you get a swarming situation, they're going to be different ages anyway. So you're probably bound to get some in that soupy stage. That's what I'm trying to make.
Yeah.
Overall, for the ordinary beekeeper, I would say if you want to keep your queen cells, don't shake. If you don't want to keep your queen cells, of course, it doesn't matter monkeys. I think it's about all I'll say. But be on the cautious side all the time, especially if you've only got a small number of colonies.
And the final one was we've discredited bee brushes, but what about using a feather or a leaf to brush the bees off? Would they react to the same way that they do with the brush?
What I do is get a where are we? There. 8 inches or so long, a green twig out the hedgerow. Just take the leaves off it. That's what I use, and I don't have any problems at all. But I've known bees get really stroppy with
well, they get stuck between the bristles, don't they? And
they do. Yeah,
releasing alarm pheromone.
Well, of course, what you're also doing, Richard, is you're rolling them, and bees do not like being rolled.
No, not nice at all.
I've got a trick of just tapping bees on their backs on the comb, and they just move out of the way. But I've seen people do that. Whoops.
Yeah.
And it rolls them over, and you end up half a dozen stings in your hand. Yeah. Treat them kindly. If you want to use a bee brush, use a bee brush. But I suggest strongly taking your bee suit and your gloves off and carry on using the bee brush and see what happens. You might not be getting stung, but other people are.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Roger. That's it. You've answered them all.
All of them?
All of them. Don't say that, because they'll be writing more.
God, I don't mind, yeah. I feel a lot better than I did about 4:30. I'll tell you that.
Yeah. When are we next on? Tuesday the 6th. Bee improvement as a group. Some ideas.
Oh, crikey, I better get that one started.
That's on Tuesday. Yeah. And I believe Brian, our group's leader from BIBBA, is going to join you to answer some questions and things as well, which is good.
Okay, we'll look forward to it.
Yeah, lots of people saying thank you very much, and
there's 2 more coming, and 3 more. Anyway,
no, they're all saying thank you, and you deserve to have a pint. I don't know whether they're offering to buy you.
Well, I was hoping so.